Today on the show, insect cries mark the end. Autumn and my song are the color of the last leaves. I have no idea what that means, but we are finishing the book today.
It's the theme of this book. Yeah. Beautiful words, but they are mere words. Welcome to Gom Jabbar, your guide to the iconic world of Dune. We'll be exploring the themes, philosophies, and characters found in the sandy depths of this vast universe, from Frank Herbert's groundbreaking novels to the adaptations on film and TV. My name is Leo.
And my name's Abu.
Today on the show, we are landing this massive flight that we've been on.
That's right. That some might say this ornithopter.
Oh.
We're landing it on the landing pad.
It's been a 12-worm journey.
Indeed.
And yet it has flown by like an ornithopter.
Ornithopter.
We are ending God Emperor of Dune. If I'm not mistaken, we started this book club in the late 1990s.
That's right.
So yeah, it feels pretty monumental to be here at the finish line.
Yes, Justin Bieber had just started his career when we started this book. And some might say those two events are related cosmically.
Yeah, you might say just correlation. No, causation. His rise and fall is this book. Now, for some quick housekeeping, spoiler warning. Hey, no spoilers. But if you've done your reading, you've read all of this book. So we're going to talk about everything up through the final pages of God Emperor of Dune and nothing beyond.
That's right. And of course, a huge shout out to our Kwisatz Haderach level patrons at the top of the show. We had a huge influx of support at the start of 2024, and we want to thank Case Aiken, Daniel Dion, Roman Caballo, Jonathan Lambert, and C.R. Spruill.
Damn.
5 Kwisatz Haderach level patrons. Thank you all so much for your generosity and your support. It's what makes this show possible. Of course, our gratitude extends to all of our patrons and all of our listeners. We wouldn't be here without you.
Indeed. +1 thumbs up to that. Very true. Now, today's episode, let's talk about the game plan. As always, this is a book club. So, surprising nobody, we're going to be talking about the things that we told you to read.
That's right.
A little different than normal because this is the final episode. Rather than separating things into summaries and then takeaways and morsels, we're kind of just going to wrap everything into a discussion of the final 2 chapters, kind of a deep dive into the final 2 chapters. And then we're going to share our concluding thoughts, and that'll be this book club.
That'll be that. Okay, before we get into today's reading, Leo, let's take a breather. Let's gear up.
Yes.
We have a massive discussion ahead of us.
Yes, we do.
Don't go anywhere, dear listener. We'll be right back to finish this book.
Welcome back, everybody. Oh, buckle up, because we've got some foreshadowing to wade through. Our first chapter today is chapter 49, the penultimate chapter of God Emperor of Dune. Wild. And in this first chapter, we join the, I haven't said this word out loud, peregrination is how they say it in the audiobook. Okay, we join the peregrination, my favorite new word, as the peregrination leaves a rest stop and prepares to head back out on the road.
Right.
Now, this chapter is, as I joked, dripping with just the heaviest of hands of foreshadowing throughout of what is to come. And, of course, the dramatic events of the final chapter. There's a great moment toward the very beginning of the chapter where both Leto and Moneo look over the same sort of chasm of a nearby canyon.
Right.
And both of them are like, falling to our deaths. That sounds nice. Good thing that won't happen a chapter from now.
Exactly. In fact, I would say that this foreshadowing of Leto's death has been happening for a few chapters now pretty aggressively. Yeah, and totally. It's been quite difficult to actually not call it out in our episodes. But of course, we want to maintain our spoiler-free nature, so we've had to avoid that. But yeah, astute readers or people who are rereading this book and know what's to come have probably caught on to some of the very heavy foreshadowing of Leto's death.
Yeah, and it goes almost so far as to, like, I almost wrote a bullet point here, but I'll just say it. There seems to be some blending of time awareness as well. Like, Leto has memories of things that are going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And so even there's this moment, right? Leto's looking down at the dewdrops on the damp needles of these trees in the canyon, and it says, each of them sending a promise of pain to Leto. He longed to close the cart's cover, but there was an immediacy in those jewels which attracted his memories even while they repelled his body. The opposed synchrony threatened to fill him with turmoil.
Right.
So, yes, of course, he may be just thinking about back when he was a woodcutter on Old Terra and loved dewdrops on trees. But it's also, he thinks about this moment of him dying with the rushing waters, and he thinks about water as being this part of this death that he hasn't seen. So there is this sort of play of time, which is always very interesting with these Kwisatz Haderach
The nature of prescience.
Yeah, exactly. And we saw the same thing happen with Paul, right? Where he was struggling to kind of place himself in time after that initial time jump in the first book.
Right.
Now, Moneo is concerned and kind of freaking out.
On brand.
Typical. Right now, his concern is security, and he's annoyed that Leto basically like dismissed all the guards and is just chilling on his own. The Majordomo's apprehension has been growing, to be clear, for a few chapters, right? We've seen him get more and more anxious and antsy, and it seems clear, especially knowing what's going to happen, that Moneo kind of feels the end coming. He kind of like clearly has that sort of sixth sense about what is to come, especially considering how odd the God Emperor is acting.
Right.
We actually had put this script up on Patreon, and Roman Caballo left a really interesting note talking about how Moneo, his test, involved being exposed to all of this spice essence and his visions of the golden path, right? Now, Roman is pointing out the question of whether or not Leto kind of told Moneo about his eventual death and, you know, the success of the golden path needing that to happen. And clearly Moneo saw the golden path, but I think regarding Roman's comment and just in general, I think we are seeing in this chapter and the next one, Moneo continuing to fail to meet his full kind of potential, literally until the moment he's falling to his death. Like, until that moment that he's toppling to his death, he is continuing to judge, and he's believing in Leto's genuine godhood, and he's kind of clinging to the bureaucracy and the aristocracy, right?
Yeah. Interesting. Maybe we'll talk about it once we get there, but you think he has some revelation? Because I think he doubles down at the moment of his death. Leto, I believe, you know?
I believe he understands. I think it's a moment of revelation because of what Leto says to Siona in the cave as he's dying. Because he's like, Moneo finally understood.
Well, we'll get to it. TBD.
We'll get to it. TBD. Now, we know that Moneo knows that if Leto were to allow himself to die, it would be only to ensure the golden path. Like, Moneo knows better than anybody in the universe that Leto is doing all of this for the golden path. So if Leto is like, I set up these things to let me die, Moneo would know intellectually that that was why. And yet he rejects the possibility of Leto dying. So we are seeing him fail to connect these dots in a way that I think is telling regarding why Moneo is not the person he needed to be to become someone like Siona. Right. Besides the fact that Leto can just see him in prescience. So that aside, Moneo's feelings about this are laid out explicitly. His feelings about all of this kind of anxiety. Quote, Moneo feared a universe where there was no God Emperor. He would rather die than see such a universe. End quote.
Wish granted, I suppose.
Fucking wish granted. Say less, Moneo.
Save a Wish Foundation's like, we got you.
We got you, as they armed their laser gun. Now, Moneo's anxiety comes to a breaking point, and he straight up asks Leto, like, what the fuck is happening? Like, why am I so anxious? What's happening today? And Leto dodges the question like the best of politicians, and basically is like, I'm going to use this moment as a teachable moment. Quote, there's no reassuring ceiling over you, Moneo. Only an open sky full of changes. Welcome it Every sense you possess is an instrument for reacting to change. Does that tell you nothing? End quote.
Welcome it.
Welcome it. Oh, I love it. And genuinely, I highlighted this little quote because it was one of those moments in the book that I'm like, fuck yeah, Leto. Like, we are equipped with all these tools for dealing with change. And in Buddhist teaching, time is a measurement of change. So this idea of like, I want to be safe inside my box with a ceiling over me, shielded from change. It's like, no. That's the lesson. That's one of these big themes in Dune. And the lesson that Leto's been trying to teach humanity. You have to embrace change. You have to avoid stagnation and, explore the unexplored.
Right.
Look upward, right? Welcome what you see.
Totally.
Now, Moneo is appropriately cowed and apparently terrified. He mumbles some lame excuse about just, completely deflecting as well. And he rushes off when Leto says, get we. I'm tired of you.
Right.
Bring me we.
Yeah.
So Moneo rushes off. We shows up, and we all know this feeling. If you've ever been in love, just immediately lightens
Horniness?
Leto's mood.
Right.
Oh yeah, he's super horny. He's immediately rock hard.
Yeah.
No. Leto's like, I'm immediately more calm. This is sweet. She just is lovely.
Right.
And she actually shows up rocking a golden gown.
Okay.
That the fish speakers made for her. Leto's like, never seen that before. And he even warns her. He's like, that kind of reminds me of how people dress up sacrifices in ceremonial garb. She dismisses the thought because she's effectively like, you're in control. And he's like, yeah, I'm in control.
Right.
So totally fine. But again, the foreshadowing, the thematic imagery, just so heavy-handed.
Yeah.
In not a way that I dislike. I mean, again, it feels like things are coming to a head in a way that ends the book.
Yeah. I think I differ a bit on that. I was finding myself cringing at the golden gown on the golden path. And then Leto straight up saying the words, our fates are joined.
Mm-hmm.
The very day that they're about to both tumble off a bridge and die together. I was like, okay, I get it. We're all going to die here. So I was like, Frank, you're better than this. I know you're better than this because I've read the previous 3 books. And I was just like, okay, I get it.
Do you think that's because you know the ending? If you didn't think it would end that way?
I don't remember reading this book for the first time. So I can't truthfully answer your question. I don't remember if I was surprised by Leto dying at the end or if I saw it coming. But that's a really great point. I know it's coming, so now every little foreshadow is too obvious.
Yeah. I mean, I remember reading it because I read this book in 2020. We had started this podcast and I hadn't read this book before, so I read it. And I remember feeling like I missed something when the bridge started falling. And I was like, there's no way he's going to... Oh, he's dying. Oh, he's dying. Oh, that's great. Oh, so in some ways it wasn't as obnoxious for me, even on this reread, because I remember not exactly being sure of what was going to happen. And
yeah, good point.
And then ultimately, this time around, I was more caught. I didn't notice the gold symbology that kind of got brought back over and over again. Naturally, there's golden path, of course, but the gold gown. There's also the golden smoke from the suspensors that are shot, and the golden smoke. The golden smoke that seems heavy-handed this time, but I didn't even register in my brain in 2020.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Again, I guess I got that jaded, read every word 100 times point of view.
Oh my God, Vader's his father. Big fucking surprise.
Oh my God,
Whoa.
I am your daddy. Okay, whatever,
wow,
bro.
Stupid. Can't believe Dumbledore kills Snape. Oh my God.
Gosh, we all saw that coming.
From the first scene. When Dumbledore said, Snape's going to kill me. I was like, whoa, crazy. Getting back to the reading. This chapter ends on a genuinely funny and intimate note.
Yeah.
I loved the writing here between Hui and Leto. As Moneo emerges from the guest house, and Hui is like, hey, can you lay off Moneo just a little bit? And Leto's like, what, are you two friends? I, of course, harkened back to I am a friend of Jameis, the word friend and the kind of camaraderie. I don't know, that rang the same bell for me. But she says, quote, we are friends of the stomach. We both like yogurt.
Amazing line.
Hilarious. And Leto is chuckling at this, straight up laughing.
Mm-hmm.
And Moneo is grateful to Hui, because he sees that Leto's in a much better mood, and he's like, oh, thanks. You really took the heat off me.
Yeah.
Boss is in a better mood. This is great.
Totally.
And he shoots her kind of a grateful glance. There's this cute moment of camaraderie between Moneo and Hui, which is nice, considering this whole book he's been like, she's a disgusting Tleilaxu, filthy abomination. He's been just disgusted by her this entire book. Now he's kind of seeing some of her tact, which is nice.
Absolutely.
I also wanted to point out here that immediately after this moment where Leto tells Moneo, let's go. Let's get the party on the road. Let's get the peregrination on the road. He actually grins at Hui.
Yeah.
Right? There's this sentence, Leto grinned at Hui. And I highlighted it because it is the most human Leto has been described as, in my opinion. Like, this is such a casual human thing to just like grin at the girl that you love. And I think that in these final chapters, we are seeing so much more of Leto's humanity, which is something that Hui is reawakening, right? Something that's been missing since Ganima died, but something that is back, which is just beautiful to see.
I mean, he's joking around. The God Emperor is joking around and doing bits.
Yeah.
I also loved the line in this moment where he says, oh, don't I play the impatient groomsman very well? Like, he's doing like wedding bits with her.
Yeah.
And I found myself giggling at that line in particular. It's a really humanizing moment, and it shows us what Hui brings out in the God Emperor, who up to this point, like, his only humor has been, I would argue, dry, sardonic,
totally.
ironic, he's not out here doing bits until this moment.
Yeah. It's always like teaching, or it's like tired of people's being dumb, basically.
Yeah.
Like, it just always seems therapeutic or cathartic, but never like in good nature.
Yeah.
So
never silly. No one would be caught dead calling Leto too silly.
No. Except for maybe Malky. And he is now dead.
That rogue.
So there we go.
That's
that
right.
rogue. That Han Solo archetype. Now, I also wanted to point out that Leto's secret that Hui captures, quote, you seldom need words. You speak directly to the senses with your own life, end quote, is such a beautiful bow to tie on this thesis that words are messy and muddled and cyanoke and all that in a word, Lord, and all of that shit is just wrapped up in that one moment, right?
Right.
Alan Watts has a quote, we are so tied up in our minds that we've lost our senses. And again, thinking back on the fact that Frank and Alan were at least lightly friends, it's the sort of thing that I think is very in line with Leto's teachings and Leto's theses. And again, this idea of like, what is truth and the experience of truth outside of language and outside of words, which I just really, really appreciate.
Yeah.
And it's exactly the sort of thing that Leto appreciates Hui appreciating because after she gives him this incredible compliment that he is uniquely positioned to receive, we have the final words of this chapter, which encapsulate, I think, the moment in a really touching way. Because he thanks her. Leto says this to Hui, quote, between the superhuman and the inhuman, I have had little space in which to be human. I thank you, gentle and lovely Hui, for this little space.
Oh my God.
And like Leto, we have tears running down our face. And like Leto, they're causing blue flames to erupt from our skin, which has become so dry in this New York winter.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. What a beautiful line. I loved that so much.
I think it also speaks to he is superhuman and inhuman in the evaluation of others, right? Like these are what people, Moneo sees him as superhuman, Nayla sees him as superhuman, Siona sees him as inhuman, right? Duncan sees him as inhuman. Hui is the only one who gives him space to be himself and to be a human, because he is still a human no matter what we are told about him, and his reaction to water and blah, blah, blah. It is just so tragic. And again, we'll talk about it when he's the Sand Trout are coming apart, but it's like he is such a sympathetic character at the end of this book. And we see in that moment that what Hui does for him and why it is so important for her to exist for him.
Yeah, absolutely. This speaks to Hui's character as well. Her ability to see through the super and inhuman and see just the human underneath.
Totally. Yeah. Well, that is our first chapter. We are going to talk about chapter 50. Ooh. But we're going to take a quick break. So don't go anywhere. Dry your eyes, dear listener. For when we return, we're ending this book.
Welcome back, everyone. Let's continue with our chapter summaries and deep dive.
Yeah.
Next up, we have the final chapter of this book, chapter 50. Buckle up for this one, folks. This final chapter is absolutely massive. And I will say, in classic Frank Herbert fashion, what has been a very long, slow burn of a book suddenly goes into overdrive, and we hit a breakneck speed right
Ridiculous.
At the end
here. Yeah. Yep.
So, getting into the chapter, at the start, we join Nayla and the crew from Tuono Village as they take up positions for what clearly is an ambush.
Yeah.
What anyone at a glance can see is an ambush.
Here we are, about to ambush the God Emperor Leto.
Everyone get in ambush positions, please.
We all good? We have our ambush positions? Cool. Anyway, so excited for this ambush.
Now, hilariously and genuinely kind of tragically, Nayla literally recognizes that the actions she is about to take, aka firing the fucking laser gun at the bridge, are about to kill not only the God Emperor, but everyone else in the entourage as well, including the fish speakers down on the bridge. But she genuinely believes that she is about to witness a miracle.
Right.
That killing everyone on the bridge is not going to happen, despite the actions she is about to take, that she has been ordered to take. And I found this passage really interesting and honestly terrifying, because we see a glimpse into how deep Nayla's fanaticism truly runs, to the point where she is simply ignoring reality and rational thought, simply ignoring what her senses are telling her right in front of her, because of that belief in the God Emperor.
Yeah, I mean, later we'll see the crysknife fall from her robe, right? The one that Leto gave to her,
right,
as a manipulation tactic to make her this believer. The person who would pull the trigger on the laser gun, even if it means killing Leto, because Siona commanded it. I mean, we see the 4D chess that Leto's been playing, but also, good Lord, the tragedy of Nayla doing this, thinking, oh, he'll stop it. He's going to perform a holy miracle, capital H, capital M,
right?
Because he's God Emperor Leto Atreides.
Yeah. And her rationalizations in her mind, oh, well, Siona wouldn't do this because X, Y, Z. Like, her rationalizations have, like, such shaky ground. But the faith is just the thing holding it all up.
Yeah.
And she truly believes a miracle is about to happen.
Yeah.
Now, as Nayla is preparing to fire her laser gun, we switch to Moneo's perspective down on the bridge, as our guy is just continued to be filled with uneasiness and doubt. His anxiety is hitting a peak again.
He's like, is this the last fucking chapter of this book? What's happening? Why do I feel so anxious?
Right. What are those people on the bridge doing? Now, unbidden, one of the lute player's songs comes to Moneo's mind, and he actually finds himself wool gathering. Quote, he wished the visitors truly gone. The excitement ended. Peace once more. Peace was so near, yet he could not leave his duties. End quote.
Oh, so two things. First, I was like, okay, visitors in this context, because then he's talking about Tuono, and he's been to Tuono before, and how they are visitors to Tuono. And I'm like, are you wishing yourself gone? And you can't leave your duties. Are you still thinking about that chasm and falling off that chasm? Are you longing for death? Because again, wish granted, bro. Like in a second or two, you'll be dead.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to say, like, Frank, master of, show, don't tell, but also tell often and tell repeatedly and keep telling until you've read 800 pages of his book, demonstrates Moneo's inability to grasp even the most basic of Leto's lessons, right?
Right.
Leto forced peace for 3,500 years, and to people like Moneo is like, I've been forcing peace for so long because peace fucking sucks and will end all of humanity. And Moneo, like, is nodding and nodding, and right now he's like, ugh, sure would love some peace.
Yeah.
Sure would love some dope peace. Moneo, come on, dude. Haven't you been listening to any of Leto's TED Talks? You've been to every one.
Sexy, popular Moneo sitting in the back of the class.
Silver Fox Moneo.
Hasn't taken a single note all semester.
Too hot.
Is not ready for the final. He's just so hot.
He's just so ripped.
Now, you mentioned earlier Moneo thinking about his previous visit to Tuono. I did want to share a quote. It's kind of long, but I think it's really powerful, so I wanted to share it in its entirety. He thinks about Tuono, and specifically he thinks about what Leto said about that trip to Tuono back in the day.
Yes. Yeah.
Quote, "These Fremen do not know what is lost from their lives. They think they keep the essence of the old ways. This is a failure of all museums. Something fades, it dries out of the exhibits, and is gone. The people who administer the museum and the people who come to bend over the cases and stare. Few of them sense this missing thing. It drove the engine of life in earlier times. When the life is gone, it is gone." End quote. And yeah, I mean, this is classic Leto, right? His disdain for biographers earlier in the book, right? Historians that he burned at the stake. And now his clear disdain for things like museums is really telling. I find this a huge beige flag, I suppose, to use a modern term. It shows us how anxious Leto is about his legacy. He is anxious about how his reign will be remembered, and perhaps even more important to the Golden Path, how much of his lesson will actually sink in for humanity. Has everything he's done and everything he's sacrificed for the last 3,500 years all been for naught if people just don't fucking get it? Humanity's got to pass that final exam.
Yeah. Also, I feel like if this is all Frank writing on behalf of Leto, does Frank just... He's like, museums? I don't like books and I don't like museums. Fuck them all. I'm like, Frank, they're a great thing to do on a rainy day. Right. I'm in New York City. I can get in for free. It's
a wonderful date idea, too. I mean, come on.
It's a great date idea. Jesus.
Yeah. It makes sense for Leto to hate it. I do question whether this is Frank speaking as well. I would find it funny if Frank was like, man, museums are boring as fuck. Never take me to a museum. Something more exciting. Take me to Waterworld.
Frank's like, and the better thing than historians and museums is barcades where you can drink and play video games. They're fucking awesome.
I have the high score on Donkey Kong.
Come at me, bro.
All right, back to the chapter, back to our summary. All hell basically breaks loose next. Nayla fires her laser gun at the bridge, and the bridge begins to collapse, and everyone on the bridge begins to collapse with it, down into the raging river below. Moneo, desperately clinging to a loose cable, looks over and witnesses a horrific scene. He sees Hui Nori plummet to her death below as more shots come firing from the laser gun and blow apart the suspensors of Leto's cart, the only thing that perhaps could have saved him and lifted him up. Those get blown up in these golden puffs of smoke. And Moneo loses composure, loses energy, lets go of the loose cable. His hands slip, and in a haunting passage, we experience Moneo's final moments of both sheer panic and ultimately some sort of pre-death bliss. Quote, "Moneo fell freely, then, in the ecstasy of awareness. The universe opened for him like clear glass, everything flowing in a no time. 'The golden smoke, Leto!' he screamed. 'Sihanouk! I believe!' Something solid smashed into Moneo's back. His last sensation." End quote. Wow. R.I.P. to a real one. And I'm really heartbroken about all that wedding planning he did. That has utterly gone to waste, the poor guy.
He has all those save the dates on his desk, and he's just never to be sent.
Yeah.
Sad.
Really interesting. I will say, we mentioned this earlier, but to me, him screaming Leto, the golden smoke, I believe, Sihanouk, to me, this almost feels like him being lost in the ecstasy of his belief in the God Emperor and witnessing these golden puffs of smoke happening and his own death arriving. Feels like Moneo, in his final moments, seeing omens and signs of Leto's godhood and Leto's golden path appear before him. Perhaps in his final moments, he doubles down, in my opinion, on his belief into Leto's godhood. So I think Moneo ends his life basically where he spent it, as the ultimate servant to his lord Leto.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. On my initial read, the universe opened for him like clear glass, everything flowing in a no time. Felt less like metaphor and like an expression of ecstasy in his final moments, and more of like, oh no, he's Atreides, and he is seeing the clarity of time. So on my initial read, that was my understanding. But also this time reading, I caught on the sentence where Leto says, quote, "It is human to have your soul brought to a crisis you did not anticipate."
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it always is with humans. Right. Moneo understood at last, end quote. Which feels like Leto in his final moments, he's not bullshitting at this point, feels like him acknowledging that Moneo pivoted at some point and not Moneo went back to his old ways of worshiping godhood or whatever. It's like, it feels like him acknowledging Moneo finally came around in his like final moments. But I don't know. It does seem a little...
No, that's a good catch. I missed that line completely.
Well, and then also Siona responds, "I wish he'd hurry up and die." So it's like, Jesus, I get so caught up in just hating Siona in that little section, but we'll get to it. Point is, it's possible either way. I'm interested to hear what our listeners think.
Yeah.
I like the idea of Moneo having a moment of redemption, but happening so late, clearly seconds before he hits something and dies. It's a failure of him that it didn't happen until this point, but it's this moment that his like true cognizance of everything worked. And he's not going, "Curses, we failed." He's going, "Oh, hell yeah, cool, we're all right," you know?
Yeah.
I like to think it's a good moment for him.
Yeah, fair.
I mean, after all, he's so hot at the back of that class, not taking any notes.
As we know, hot people deserve only the best.
Yeah, that's what society taught me from a young age.
That's true. It's true. Okay, back to our summary. People are falling off this fucking bridge and dying. Leto is included in this cast of characters falling off the bridge. He is also in free fall, hurtling toward the raging waters below. And as we know, water, bad for him. Right. All he can think about, though, as he's falling, is those last glimpses of Hui plunging to her death and her final words echoing in his ears. This broke my heart. The last words Hui said to him, quote, "I will go on ahead, love." End quote.
Fucking unreal.
Oh.
Unreal.
Broke me, yeah.
The description of her, like, calm, or, like, relatively calm, considering the actual chaos, and, like, steadying herself in the royal cart. I'm like, what a great character.
Yeah.
Just wonderful.
Yeah. I, too, now love Hui as much as Duncan and Leto and every other Atreides. Now, Leto finally hits the water, and as we expected, it's awful. His mind and body erupt in just pure agony. His worm body around him sort of begins to dissolve. There's glimpses of sand trout swimming away in the rushing currents, breaking away from his body. And he's ultimately carried by the river around a bend and thrown out onto a sandbar near Siege Tabur. Or rather, where Siege Tabur used to be. And what's left of him, in my mind, from the descriptions we get, is just this, like, dying, disgusting husk of a worm and human. Just this, like, burning flesh. You know, I imagine, like, blue smoke coming off of him, too, because of the spice coming in contact with the water.
Literally, like, impossible to look at without being disgusted and repelled.
Completely.
Like, this bloody mess,
Definitely. Now, he crawls to safety in a nearby cave, and is quickly followed by Nayla, Duncan, and Siona, who rappel down on ropes, and basically look upon what remains of the once mighty God Emperor, this disgusting, dying flesh of a monster. And in a fit of rage, Duncan grabs Nayla's laser gun.
Well, first, he attacks her.
She does kind of slap him aside. Right. That is like, a funny moment.
I'm busy looking at my God, who's, I guess he's going to do a miracle now or something.
Right. And
we see how just completely ineffective he is.
Yeah, that is a great call out. He does rush her head on, and she full on just slaps him away like a fly. But he does reach for the laser gun at her waist and grabs it and begins to fire into her, unloading, reducing the fish speaker to a gross mound of smoking flesh and cloth. That's all that remains of her after he empties the laser gun clip into her. And I found the symmetry here to be quite beautiful, that she gets to share a similar fate to her god, because Leto too is a burning, dying husk of flesh right there in front of her.
Yeah, that's a great catch. I'll also point out, this is also where the crysknife falls from her robes and shatters upon the ground.
Yeah.
And Duncan doesn't even see that, but this was a crysknife that belonged to one of Stilgar's wives.
Mm-hmm.
So this is another piece of history that's kind of falling and breaking apart and being put to rest finally, right?
Yeah.
This artifice, these little tokens of manipulation and god worship that are becoming meaningless with Leto's death and with Nayla's death. I also went back and looked at that moment that he gave the crysknife to Nayla, and he says in that it would only barely outlive her. Like, it would shatter through its natural lifespan of a crysknife a little bit after her lifespan. So it's kind of funny that, yeah,
seconds is a little bit.
yeah. I mean, I was expecting months or years, but really you meant that literally after she was shot with laser gun.
Right. Well, words. You know how Leto is with them.
All that in a worm lord? Anyway.
Now, Siona and Duncan then turn toward what is left of Leto, who, in his half-conscious, almost hallucinogenic state, sees Siona as this female demon, and he instinctively screams out, "Hanmia!" at her. And of course, we had to instantly smash our keyboards and begin doing research on what that word meant. And lo and behold, this is yet again another reference to Japanese no theater, adding this to our many references in the book so far. And specifically, this is a reference to a mask that is worn during plays. In my research, I dug up that the Museum of Cultural Masks explains that these masks represent Hania, spelled a little differently than in the book, which is, quote, the soul of a female who has become a demon or ghost through jealousy or obsession. The mask is designed to look angry from straight ahead, but sorrowful when tilted downward, end quote.
There's so much to pick apart in that as it applies to Siona.
You're right, that whole definition applies to Siona in this moment on every level.
Yeah, I also couldn't help but kind of pump my fist in victory, because in the Morsels of Book Club 19, we talked about Kanoa, the Fremen expression of the Iron Ring of Jealousy, which is a no play that has the same title and features a lady demon jealousy thing that I'm like would have been played by the Hanya mask. Like, that would have been portrayed with that mask. And in that play, the jealous demon is defeated by a diviner, but then is said to will come back. And so the play's sort of thesis is this jealous evil demon will outlive the diviner, the oracle, basically.
Yeah.
Which just feels so fucking appropriate to this moment. So I was like, hey, I think that's 10 points to Gryffindor, even though I'm in Ravenclaw. I think that's 25 points to Ravenclaw. Just saying.
I agree. It is very interesting to see the very quick succession of Japanese references in this book, and specifically Japanese no theater references in this book. Clearly, Frank picked up a play at some point.
Yeah.
Okay, back to our events in this cave. Siona approaches Leto's body, his dying corpse, and she touches him at his behest. But then she turns away because she's just overcome with emotion. This is way too much for her to handle right now. Obviously, there's a lot of disgust, but I like to imagine there's also sadness and anger and awe at what she's witnessing. Her world is changing forever. Her world has turned upside down because her entire existence almost has been in the pursuit of killing this unkillable god. And now he's in front of her dying. And the waves of emotion that must be hitting her must be almost incomprehensible. And Leto, sort of in his dying moments here, is kind of ranting and raving at her and at Duncan. And while he's doing this, his mind instinctively activates the hidden Ixian printers all the way in their secret beta early version of a no room where he's hidden them.
Yeah. Yeah.
It sounds like he normally has to like sort of mentally flip a switch, right? Like use his Neuralink to turn the printers on and start journaling. Here in his dying moments, it just happens instinctively. And this is so profound because this will give future historians a full account of the final thoughts of Leto II Atreides. Right. The printers are out here printing. He's here dying and ranting and raving and saying some profound things at the same time. And historians will get all of that with 100% accuracy. Once again, in this moment, when the printers activate, Leto's thoughts reveal to us this desperate desire to be understood by humanity and for his legacy to be corrected. He thinks, quote, "Remember what I did. Remember me. I will be innocent again." End quote. And of course, that's going to be printed forever.
It's a tough look. I'm so desperate for your acknowledgement. Notice me, senpai. I didn't necessarily get the desperate desire of that. The way it read for me was like his commandment as the author of these many journals, acknowledging that in remembering him and reading these books and reading these words, he will be innocent again. It'll reframe his like perceived guilt of being a tyrant. But nevertheless, it is weird because this whole section, it's like kind of wandering in and out of moments of he's saying words and going, I don't know if I'm actually saying these.
Right,
I'm just thinking them real hard. Of course, the Ixian machines don't care one way or the other. They're just printing. But it's an interesting moment where he's saying very confidently, I will be innocent again, or he's thinking to himself. And we kind of get a sense of that in the epilogue. But it's so interesting. Yeah.
Very interesting. Now, next up, it's Duncan's turn to approach Leto, and the dying god sort of wheezes out these instructions for the Gola. He says, quote, "Let them scatter, Duncan. Let them run and hide anywhere they want in any universe they choose." End quote. Yeah. And we're going to see that word scattered come back in the epilogue here shortly. We'll talk about it. But Duncan is focused. He's still fixating on Hui. He's like, wow, why did you let this happen, you son of a bitch? Like, I didn't know she was in the cart with you. We would never have fired on you. But, he's just absolutely distraught over Hui's death. But Leto promises that her death and his heartbreak and this loss will be repaid to him in some fashion in the future. Yeah. He tells him, hey, Duncan, you will have command and the loyalty of my fish speakers. That thing you dreamt of at Sihanouk, that ultimate power that you witnessed and you were tempted by, will actually become yours. Yeah. And also, Siona will play a part in your life and in the lives of all humanity because her genes carry the seed of human survival.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing that like brings together a few different like breadcrumbs that have been scattered throughout the book. Mm-hmm. I also wanted to point out the order of this conversation was really interesting to me, and I think is telling about Leto's experience of this moment, right? So Duncan says, damn you, what are you saying? I'd have sooner let her live with you. Leto says, let. I did not let anything. Which doesn't make sense as a response to that statement, because Duncan's not saying in that moment, you let something happen. He's saying, I would have rather let her live with you, right? Hmm. The next thing Duncan says is, why did you let Hui die? Which suggests to me that Leto was responding to Duncan saying, why did you let Hui die? Before Duncan even fucking said it.
Yeah.
Which is so cool. That's some main character bullshit.
Amazing.
And I fucking love it.
Yeah. That's some anime bullshit,
Yeah.
I saw your attack before it even happened.
Yeah. I heard your words before you spoke them. I mean, it just seems to me that in this moment, Leto is perhaps a little desynchronized with time.
Oh,
like his consciousness is sort of floating. And naturally, we see him, his awareness is for a moment with the Ixian dictatel. He's overcome by internal thoughts and other voices in his collective psyche and all this different stuff. But almost like Paul, where he's like, I don't know where in time I am, when he was like first awakening as a Kwisatz Haderach in that first book. It's interesting to see Leto again, just responding to Duncan before he even speaks. It's so cool. I
Yeah,
don't know.
that's a really great catch. That completely went over my head. But I think you're absolutely spot on there. He's literally responding to a thing Duncan hasn't said yet.
And Duncan's so caught up and sad about he doesn't even notice it.
Yeah.
Leto's like blue. Duncan's like, what's your favorite color? Oh,
fuck.
we is, oh, God.
Yeah.
Siona's like, I'm sorry, did I just hear that conversation? No one's going to say anything?
Right.
No one? Nayla? Oh, you're still dead. Okay,
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, really great
right.
catch. Really great catch. Well, Leto is desperately, despite any desynchronization with time issues he might be having, he is trying to get some important information out there before he finally goes off into that dream state and little pearls of wisdom across the planet.
Right.
He reveals to Duncan the location of his secret spice hoard, the thing that for thousands of years people have been looking for. And for thousands of years, nobody thought, hey, maybe his home siege?
Maybe the siege where he fucking grew up?
Has anyone considered his hometown?
Inconceivable. I will say, as much as we joke about it, probably a testament to his crafting of the official histories and the oral histories, that the siege that we as Dune readers know as being his home siege, they don't know that.
Yeah.
The Duncans know that, but they don't even think to mention it. He's just like, Siege to Bur. Yeah. Most people are like, what the fuck is Siege to Bur?
Right.
So you're right. It's like the most obvious fucking hiding space in the goddamn world, other than like maybe Duke Leto the shrine of his skull, but I don't even know if that's still there. Yeah, it's super, super obvious.
Yeah, but it's there in Siege to Bur. Everyone can go get the spice if they want it, now that Duncan knows. He also tries to explain how important Siona is, because as we know, she's invisible to prescient visions.
Right.
Quote, I give you a new kind of time, without parallels, he said. It will always diverge. There will be no concurrent points on its curves. I give you the golden path. That is my gift. End quote. So again, that lesson, he's hammering it home once again. You get to venture out into a future that is unexplored, that is not tainted by prescience, and that is new and exciting and bold and scary, and all of those things that are the opposite of stagnation, which is the ultimate death.
Yeah.
Now, after all of this talking, Leto's worm body finally starts to disintegrate and melts away, leaving behind this like disgusting little shell of a human.
Yeah, with like bits and pieces. It was like
a
jawbone and some...
Yeah, I mean, I imagine like a cheddar cheese human body, kind of, is how it was described.
Yeah.
Disgusting stuff. But of course, even this moment of vulnerability with his body finally visible to Duncan and Siona, he turns this into a lesson. Quote, look at me, I say. You expected a giant, and you found a gnome. Now you're beginning to know the responsibilities which come as a result of actions. What will you do with your new power, Duncan? End quote. He's like, bro, look at me. I made some bold choices, and this is what happens. And sometimes you have to make these bold choices. Are you capable? What are you going to do? I'm handing you the reins of the universe. He's really trying to impress the gravity of the situation on Duncan and Siona.
And to be clear, this is immediately preceding his, I think of all my Duncans, I approve of you the most, quote.
Yeah.
Which, of course, pisses off Duncan a little bit. But, you could say to someone, now the responsibilities that come as a result of actions as like an admonishing way. But it also feels as though in that second statement, he's kind of saying, hey, I see you. You did this, and you're responsible for it, but it's fine with me. Like, good job. You don't have to, like, carry a weight with you because of this. You know, someone who is so loyal to House Atreides, blah, blah, blah. It seems like a moment of kind of he's vindicating him a little bit.
Yeah. A big, I trust you. I'm gone, and now it's up to you, and I trust you. That's kind of how I read into it. And yeah, as we've said, in these sort of, like, final rantings and ravings, Leto is trying to explain to Duncan and Siona that anything is possible in this new magical universe that he has given them. Humanity's been dominated by this like gauntlet of prescience for thousands of years, but no more. You're free to embrace the new and the bold and to scatter and run toward the undiscovered corners of the universe. and to try things that have never been done before. I have unshackled you. That is what Leto is trying to get across here. And while this is happening, his inner voices are in utter turmoil. I found this so interesting because his inner voices are pissed. They're like, bro, you got us killed. Like, we're all about to die because of you. Like, what if you had done this? Why didn't you do this? They're all like questioning his actions. And frankly, they're starting to overtake his consciousness as Leto himself begins to weaken and die. They're just like creating all this noise in his head. And Leto yells out what I read as almost a final bow tie on this lesson for humanity. He yells at both the inner voices, but also at Duncan and Siona as a message for all of humanity to come. Quote, "Only fools prefer the past." End quote.
Yeah. It's funny that at this point he has no idea if he's saying things out loud or not. It seems as though this wasn't something that made it outside of his body, but clearly he would have been fine with anybody receiving this message.
Yeah. It'll be in the journals, regardless.
It'll be in the journals. Yeah. Oh, so good.
Humanity at some point will definitely read it.
Yeah, I also really do wonder, like, what does that mean? So Harum, the like community pharaonic leader of his internal abomination community, is potentially no more then? Or in his dying moments, like the unifying mission of all of the voices of the Golden Path are now kind of weakening and falling apart. I'm sure that there is a lot of in-universe like world building that you could do at this moment, just to look at how does other memory work and how does...
Yeah, I almost imagine it as they've struck a deal. Leto is their host and they get to exist within him as long as he is their shepherd.
Yeah.
And he has been for 3,500 years. And now this dude fucking fell off a bridge and died. And they're like, bro, we made a deal. You were supposed to keep us alive. And so, yeah, they're kind of like...
Oh, shit, with the laser gun you gave her? Oh, man.
Yeah, exactly. So they're kind of like, deal's off, buddy. Like,
yeah.
We weren't turning you into abomination because you promised us this, and now... Well, regardless, Leto 2 is officially KO'd at this point. Well, not KO'd, he's dead. He's dead. He perishes with a gasping hiss as Duncan and Siona look down on the once immortal god, literally lying dead at their feet. Siona takes Duncan's hand and leads him out of the cave as the two now sort of look out toward a very uncertain future, not just for themselves and what it means for their community, their planet, their loved ones, but for all of humanity, and even what their role in it will now be, given what Leto has told them and given the power that Leto has handed to them in the fish speakers, in the spice, in the Museum Fremen.
Yeah. And I'll also point out here, we see Siona owning the role that she so rejected in the presence of Leto. We see her owning that as the new kind of protector of the Golden Path in the sentence, quote, "Idaho would require gentle seduction, a care within which love might appear," end quote.
Yep.
So we see her literally like, yeah, I'll have to seduce him in order to like have a bunch of kids. Because I need
my
to.
genes are too important.
Because yeah, exactly. It's like because of the Golden Path. It's like she killed Leto, but she believes in the path and she understands her part in it, and she is going to play that part.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's an important distinction. I'm glad you brought this up. I think we, the reader, can fall into this trap of being like, oh, Siona's this like immature child, and she just has this vendetta against the God Emperor, and can't think beyond that at all. She's just like, kill, 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 kill. The God Emperor, I hate him so much. But here we see that there is wisdom in Siona. She saw the Golden Path, and Leto did successfully convince her of it. She doesn't reject the Golden Path. She rejects Leto the tyrant. And in her mind, those are two different things.
Right.
And so here she is now taking on the burden of continuing this Golden Path and ensuring it'll happen. She knows she just has to seduce the sexiest, hottest man in the galaxy.
Yeah. Easy. Just
Easy.
Be a little bit less annoying, and you're probably there. I'll also throw out one more thought that I had, which is right after Leto dies, she says, "Do you know what the oral history says? If you want immortality, then deny form. Whatever has form has mortality. Yeah. Beyond form is the formless, the immortal." Duncan accuses, that sounds like him, right, Leto? She says, I think it was. Which is so fascinating to me. because throughout this book, we understand that Siona rejects the official history and embraces the oral history.
Right.
The oral history belongs to the people. It is of the people. This is the truth. And the bullshit is the propagandists, is the official from the Empire history.
Totally.
And yet in this moment, she's showing the awareness of like, no, I mean, it's probably all.
Right. Fuck. It was all him all along.
I mean, it was probably all him. And even then, I don't know that this is her saying, and thus the oral history should go away. She's saying, no, there's value in the shit that he said too. Like, she's not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. To this distinction of the tyrant and Leto, she killed the tyrant. She hated the tyrant. He got Quuteg killed. I get it. He's the best. But in his teachings, there was a lot of really good stuff. And even in that moment, he's dead now. And she's like, here's this lesson of his I memorized. And Duncan's like, you sound like him. And she's like, yeah, probably.
Yeah. Totally. Even at the end here, I don't believe that Siona thought Leto was doing a bad thing with the Golden Path. She maybe didn't agree with how he went about it for the last 3,500 years, and thus wanted to end his reign and kill him. But she sees its purpose and knows that it's necessary, and that her genes will be key to saving all of humanity.
Right.
But let's get to the final lines of this chapter, because there's a bit to unpack here too. Duncan asks Siona what Leto meant when he explained to them not to fear the Ixians. He said that the Ixians could no longer create Arafel. What does that mean, Siona? And Siona simply responds with, quote, "That's the cloud darkness of holy judgment. It's from an old story." End quote. And she doesn't elaborate any further on that, but a little bit of research on our part reveals that she's basically correct in what she says here. Arafel translates roughly to Mr. Fog, and its biblical interpretation is related to this idea of like a dark cloud darkness, and it's also very much tied to these warnings and holy judgments when you take it in a biblical context. And so that is seemingly the context in which Leto is using the term. He's basically saying the Ixians can no longer create some like device of holy judgment and doom upon humanity. I've at least prevented that because of Siona and the blindness to prescience. And that ends our story. That ends our story with Leto and Duncan and Siona and this wonderful cast of characters. But we are not done yet.
So many of them fucking died.
So many of them died, truly.
Yeah. The last, 10 pages, 5 pages.
Right.
We lost 2/3 of the cast.
Truly. But it's not over yet, because there is a short little epilogue that's wrapped up in this chapter here at the end of the book, where we jump to this report from our girl Hadi Binoto, who you might remember from the opening lines of this book. So we will get more into that in just a little bit. Let's take another breather after this massive discussion, but we will be back to talk about this epilogue and share our final thoughts on this book.
Yes, we will. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you're buckled up for another fucking killer of an epilogue written by Hadi Binoto. Now, at the end of this book, we are given a report by Hadi Binoto on the discoveries of Leto's journals at Dar es Balad. And the report is framed basically as like a secret summation by Hadi that aligns with the minority view that Leto's writings should and could reframe humanity's entire understanding of its own history.
Yeah.
And again, this kind of implies what has happened in the thousands of years since, where there is the broad consensus narrative that was developed by people in their ignorance, not seeing his journals. And now this maybe relatively fringe group who has seen the journals, processed them, and gone, oh shit, we might have to rethink a lot of this.
Yeah.
Because, wow, there's a lot of data.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, imagine something as intimate as Jesus H. Christ's Tumblr page suddenly being found, Like that would reframe that would reframe our entire understanding of so much of human history and human religion. So it is a huge find here.
You're like 4 AD, he had fucking internet? Wow. Really changes a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, listen, in line with your analogy, with your simile, we are told by Hadi Benotto that the majority view, backed by something called the Holy Church,
okay,
wonder what that is,
skepty already,
wants to carefully screen and censor the journals.
Fucking
typical! Good Lord! Yeah, for sure, if we discovered 1,000 journals written by Jesus, we would see 4 pages of them. They'd be on a floppy disk with notes written on it, and we would never see the contents.
We'd never see it.
Brian! Anyway. Now, Hadi gives us some absolutely tantalizing hints here about what occurs after the events of God Emperor of Dune and the death of Leto II. So let's touch on some highlights. If only there were 2 more books to read.
I know.
Thank goodness. So first, Arrakis is now called Rakis.
Okay, cool.
Sick. Dodge that syllable. Save some time. There is a cult of Sister Chenoa. Hashtag deserved. Get it, girl. Have your cult. Fuck, Chenoa's so cool. And although its worship was perhaps based on legends rather than the facts laid out in Leto's journals that people would then be like, oh shit, oh yeah, wow, holy hell, he told her she would have a cult. How did he know that? That's crazy. It is still a thing, which is great.
Yeah.
So nice to see that Leto wasn't just bullshitting her. She was in fact remembered forever and has a whole cult. Hey, glow up. Sick. Now, there was also a time of humanity known as the Duncan Days, brought to you by Dunkin' Donuts.
I was just about to make that joke.
Oh, really?
Wonderful. No, you read my mind.
There you go. From which the oaths, quote, by the 1,000 sons of Idaho,
holy shit,
end quote, and, quote, by the 9 daughters of Siona,
okay,
end quote. These oaths arose out of the Duncan Days.
Yeah.
And Hadi later references herself actually as a descendant of Duncan and Siona. So it's clear that they legitimately banged and had a ton of kids.
Yeah.
So good job, Leto. You predicted that as well. And Nayla, again, so fucking tragic. Nayla has been remembered in history as the great betrayer Judas, which of course we know is not true. And she only did what she thought her Lord had commanded.
Yeah.
Naturally, this is going to be re-examined potentially if Hadi Benotto gets her way. But the majority view is that she is the betrayer of the god.
Yeah.
We also get some hints at the political state of the universe. Sandworms have returned to Arrakis, so the sand trout that escaped Leto have successfully walled off some moisture and it's becoming more of a desert. But it does appear that their existence is limited to a reservation rather than across the whole planet.
Yeah.
It's not exactly the Arrakis of Dune, the first book. It's still a very different place. But hey, that doesn't super matter because holy shit, the Ixians successfully created a navigation machine.
My God.
That allows them to navigate without spice.
Amazing.
So, hey, guild navigators. Edric from Dune Messiah. No longer necessary. Get the fuck out. You're fired.
The layoffs at the Spacing Guild, devastating.
They had top quarterly earnings and they laid off everybody.
Ugh.
Typical. Spice itself is not gone altogether because it does appear that the Tleilaxu have successfully created a synthetic alternative.
Damn.
I'm sure they did so in a disgusting way. And of course, there is mention of something called, quote, the scattering and also the famine times, which we can assume were the result of humanity's explosion out into the universe after Leto's death.
Yeah.
Things that he talked about after. He talked about the billions of people dying from lack of resources following his death.
Yep.
And I guess they happened.
Right. And this desire to scatter, right? That word scatter again, this desire to leave your planet. Yeah. He oppressed them and grounded them for so long. And now humans want to be back out there. This instinct to explore the unexplored.
It's true.
That clearly happened, just as he anticipated.
Indeed it did. Now, his other predictions and plans for the Golden Path also came true. Hadi makes multiple references to pearls in the sand that the church reveres. And makes a strong case for her view, quote, "It would be a crime against both historical accuracy and science for us to abandon our attempts at communication with those, quote, pearls of awareness which the journals have located," end quote. And she even ponders whether Leto's awareness could be reawakened in some way, right? Like reviving the God Emperor, considering the incredible depth of history contained within him, but I think exactly demonstrating her lack of understanding of his journals.
Yeah,
like,
right. She hasn't gotten to that chapter yet.
No, she hasn't gotten to the whole "don't revere me, I exist so that I should never have to exist ever again."
Yeah, exactly.
And she's like, cool. Maybe we can bring him back.
Right.
Sounds great. Let's try. Now, Hadi ends the report on the hope that future historians, for generations to come, will put great value in this discovery, just as the minority does. So she's hoping that the majority view, the Holy Church, relinquishes a bit of the censorship around these journals.
Yeah, get fucked, Holy Church.
Get fucked. I've said that actual sentence in real life. And at least one of Leto's lessons seems to have sunk in, as the report ends with a quote that encapsulates his hope for humanity. Quote, "As the poet Lon Bramless has said, we are the fountain of surprises." End quote.
There you go. The
Very
opposite
cool.
of stagnation. The new, the surprising.
Oh, very cool. Fun to get to the end of this sort of book and to maybe get a sense of what happens next in the greater timeline.
Yeah.
But as we sort of wrap up this final episode on this book club, let's talk big picture. Let's talk kind of broad takeaways and notes. Abu, what do you think? God Emperor of Dune, we're officially done with it.
We are done.
Scale of 1 to 10. Smash or pass? Swipe right, swipe left? What do you think?
I simply could not rank this book on a traditional ranking system, so I'm going to go ahead and not...
The color orange out of 10.
Right, exactly, nice. Exactly. No, this is an absolutely bad shit book. And I mean that in the best and also the worst ways possible. It's an extremely divisive one for me in the Dune saga, and I think my opinion has been fairly clear on that throughout our discussions in this book.
Yeah.
Over these last 21 episodes, I find myself loving parts of it, absolutely loving parts of it. There's Leto's political insights and his historical musings that are genuinely eye-opening stuff. But just as equally, I find myself completely hating and being turned off by other parts.
Yeah.
A lot of those problematic things we've talked about on these episodes, that homophobia, for example, that's wrapped up in this pseudo-intellectualism. For me, the question comes down to, does this book reach the heights of Dune or Dune Messiah or even Children of Dune? And the answer to that is fairly clear for me. It's a no. I don't think this reaches the heights of those previous books. That original trilogy, I think, is unmatched. It's clear to me that those earlier books in the series had editors or collaborators who were able to rein in Frank and smooth over the rougher edges of his weirder ideas and kind of help him polish those to get the product to a place where it's more palatable and digestible. Whereas I think this book is clearly less focused. It's much more rambly, and in many instances, some of which we've talked about on this very book club series, Frank fails to cohesively get a point across. He may explore an idea, he may go down a rabbit hole, and then he doesn't put the period on the sentence. And so this book, more than the previous three that we've covered, truly feels like Frank Herbert unleashed, for better and for worse. All parts of him unleashed in a way that perhaps wasn't reined in by an editor that was like, hey, this part's kind of rubbing me the wrong way. Shall we reword? Sure. Shall we cut? Yeah. I think he, at this point in his career, got to just fucking write whatever he wanted, and nobody really said no to him.
Yeah, sure.
In conclusion, I'm actually going to quote Leto here. One of Leto's dying quotes from chapter 50 today pretty much encapsulates how I feel about this book. Quote, "Madness in method, that is genius." End quote. And that sums it up for me. I disagree with many ideas in this book. I am truly enlightened by many others, but ultimately I do have to respect Frank Herbert's vision. There was madness, there was problematic ideas, but there was also a method. Nothing in this book was there for no reason. Frank Herbert did not waste a single drop of ink writing the words on the page for God Emperor of Dune. And for that, I do have to respect it, because very few books get to say that. God Emperor of Dune is messy, it's incredible, it's problematic, it's iconic, it's hilarious, and at the end of the day, what more could you ask for from a wacky sci-fi adventure like this?
Yeah. Great summary.
What about you? What are your big picture final thoughts on this book?
Well, I think throughout the book club, people probably have gotten a sense of, I love this book. I have so much fun with it. I think Leto's random like banger quotes and the little moments of action are really fun. It has such a weird pace where you'll just have like 2 or 3 chapters of people talking and then 20 face dancers fighting naked Duncan Idaho. And you're
An
like,
attack on the embassy! Ah!
yeah. Bombing embassy, literally Grand Theft Auto driving his royal cart into bodies. It's like fucking nuts. Rock climbing Duncan Idaho. Beef swelling. Stroke the tendril gently. Gently. It's so weird, but I love it. It's a lot of fun. I think this book, more than the others, definitely does, as you pointed out, tread into the territory that I think causes harm, right? Like the homosexual theories, we've seen people be hurt by that. And we've seen it diminish what could have been a better book if it had just been left out or had just been said differently, if he intended it differently, right? I think I still want to read that book that he mentioned in an interview, The Sexual Cycle of Human Warfare by N.I.M. Walter, to see if it gives any insight into what he was thinking when he wrote the book. But I don't know. I just enjoy the hell out of the book. It's fun. The ending, like the first time I read this and this time again, left me just feeling sad and exhausted. Because it's like, the more you understand Leto, the more Shakespearean and the more of a tragedy it is. It's a Greek tragedy where he's just doing all of this, sacrificing everything, not being appreciated by anybody. And Siona's so fucking exhausting. And in that final moment for her to be like, ugh, can't he die faster? It's like, shut up. He's great. He saved humanity already and he's doing it again. It's such an interesting narrative. I'll point out that there's a book written in 1988 called Frank Herbert by William Toupon. I borrowed it from the Internet Archive to look up. On page 87 is this quote, "The early drafts of God Emperor show that Herbert wrote most of the novel in the first person and left notes for himself to transcribe into the third person. Material that he did not transcribe resulted in the journal quotations." End quote. Now, I remember reading that fact a while ago, but I didn't know its source. So I'm probably going to pick up a copy of this book at some point just to see what it says. But in both good and bad ways, I think that puts a lot of the book in context. Yeah. He wrote the entire book in the early drafts as Leto, just writing his journals.
Right.
And it feels like that. And so it's kind of, it doesn't feel like he failed to write a normal book. It's like he attempted to write a very strange book and then made it a little bit more normal through the editing process.
Yeah.
And I agree that he was probably only able to do that because of the knockout success of Messiah and Children of Dune. Like, I don't think he was fighting his publicist as much and his like editor as much.
Totally.
But all in all, like through this book, it's so much fun to pick apart every page and all the different like fun little references. I missed a ton of it the first time I read the book, and I laughed a lot more. I felt a lot more sympathy. I cried a couple of times. It's a great book. You're right. It does not come close to the sort of tight package of that first trilogy, but I feel like it's such a unique thing. I'm so glad we live in the universe where we have it.
Yeah. I'm glad you found that quote, because to me that leads credence to this idea that Leto, in many instances in this book, is a mouthpiece for Frank and Frank's ideas, and for Frank to explore these ideas.
Yeah.
Because I always have beef with people that are like, oh, Leto's his own character. Why you can't read into it so much that it's Frank Herbert? And it's like, well, you know.
I think you can still argue that he could have written first person an entire book as a character who had beliefs that were different than his. But you're right. I think it far more likely statistically. It's much harder to write that kind of book. He probably just wrote it mostly from what he was thinking about.
Yeah, definitely. A weird book and a great book nonetheless, and I couldn't agree more. We live in the universe where it exists, and I'm grateful for that.
Indeed. Well, that's our book club for God, Emperor of Dune.
Wow.
Now, you all might be wondering, dear listener, what's next? And as usual, our plan is to take a break from book club episodes as we wait for the public feed to catch up. We're tired. Also, a thing called Dune Part 2 is coming out in it's coming out soon. It's coming out, and you'll hear this, and it will be out soon. So in the meantime, you're hearing this episode. We want to know what you would like to hear between now and when our book club for Heretics of Dune begins. We've talked about doing Foundation. We've talked about doing other sci-fi books. We've talked about doing maybe like talks about Brian's books, maybe the Sisterhood novel that may be scaffolding for the HBO series we might get eventually. Let us know. Email us, DM us, send us your thoughts in the Discord about what you want us to explore. We want to make this next 3 months. We don't want it to be like, oh God, 3 months of not book club. Boo. We want it to be like, oh, cool. A nice breather and change of pace for us, for you, so that we're all having a good time before we rebuckle our seatbelts and get back into Frank Herbert's writing.
Right.
So let us know, for sure. Email us, message us on Discord. Again, we are going to continue producing a lot of Dune content. Our production doesn't stop even when we take a break from these Dune book clubs. So if you're a member on Patreon primarily for the book clubs, if you can, it would be great if you kept supporting us through this break. We are going to continue making Dune content. So stick around for that. Let us know what you want to hear.
Yeah. And look, of course, we hear you. Y'all want Heretics. Y'all want Chapter House. People have really been messaging us about that a lot lately. We have committed to getting through all 6 of Frank's books in our book club series. So naturally, Heretics of Dune is up next, and naturally we will get into that. We don't yet have an announcement or a date of when that will begin. We'll have to figure some things out logistically and start doing our prep work for it. These book club episodes are probably the toughest type of work we do for this show.
Agreed.
And they require a lot of reading and a lot of research and a lot of work. So as soon as we know when Heretics is happening, trust us, you will know as well. But we're looking forward to it, and we can't wait to get into those last 2 books by Frank Herbert in the Dune saga.
For sure. Well, before we let you go, dear listener, we want to remind you of a couple of ways to support the show and to keep in touch with us. And of course, the 2 best ways to support us: become a patron. Patreon.com/GomJabar. If you're hearing this on the public feed, it's been years, it feels like, since we recorded this episode. You can join the Patreon, help us, support us what we do, get early access to the book club. And of course, you can also check out our merch store, gomjabarshop.com. Those links are going to be in the show notes. Feel free to check those out. And of course, we also love to hear from you. So email us, gomjabarpodcast@gmail.com. Your thoughts, your questions, your cute pets, all of the things. Send them to us. We love to hear from you.
That we do. Bahanya. Oh, sorry.
I thought I saw jealous
possessive.
That's me. That's me still.
My ex's photo just flashed up on my screen,
Oh my God.
and I was like,
Yeah, you have to be careful. I hear they haunt pretty successfully.
Well, friends, there is no real ending. It's just the place where you stop the recording. But this podcast is always one step beyond logic, so help spread the word of Muad'Dib and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And be sure to check out the other shows on the Lore Party Podcast Network on loreparty.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at lore_party, and we are also on TikTok at Gomjabar Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, whoever controls the podcast controls the universe. We'll see you on the golden path.